Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest has over a decade and a half of experience as an emergency room nurse in Canada, and she is the author of the nonfiction book, Nursing Intuition, How to Trust Your Gut, Save Your Sanity, and Survive Your Career. Her name is Jenn Johnson, not to be confused with the worship singer of the same name, and my interview with Jenn will follow the note-taking sounds. Jenn Johnson, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Oh my God, Aaron, thank you so much for having me. I know it's been a long road getting here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, so I'm Jenn Johnson. I'm an ER nurse of over 16 years here in Hamilton, Ontario. I'm a wife, a mother, the whole kit and caboodle kind of thing. But I've recently written a book on nursing intuition and how to trust your gut, save your sanity, and survive your career. And it's one of these books where it's, it really just was trauma put onto paper originally. And yeah, it's crazy. You talk so much about it that you kind of get done talking about it at a point. But then people come up to you and they're like, "Oh my God, you've written a book. It was so great to read." I'm like, "Pardon?" Like, "Oh yeah, the book." Like, okay, yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. And it's been such a whirlwind writing it and then getting it out into the world and for everybody to read. So it's been a heck of a road.
Your book, which was released in October of last year, is titled Nursing Intuition, How to Trust Your Gut, Save Your Sanity, and Survive Your Career, and it's a nonfiction book. Without spoiling too much of your book, what is it about?
A mix. When they want you to try and, pigeonhole your book into a couple of categories on, Amazon or Ingram Sparks, I actually had a really tough time because yes, it is nonfiction, but it's a little bit also, part memoir. It's a lot of my stories from the ER. It's educational. Let me explain to you how to trust your gut because I can guarantee you're probably already doing it. But let me help you, feel it a bit more and really bring it into your everyday life. It's also a bit manic at times with my ER pump up playlist at the back of it, just to kind of let you know that, nobody's got it all figured out. We're all just kind of making it work as much as we can. And, it's okay not to have it all figured out because life is a process.
Part of the subtitle of your book is Trust Your Gut. That's not the entirety of it, but by trust your gut, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so, everyone has got intuition. It's one of those things that you're just kind of born with, but just like any other skill, like riding a bike or learning to swim, it needs practice to be able to really serve you well. So in order to learn how to trust your gut, it's all about just listening to yourself. So if you're in situations, women especially will know this, you walk into a room and it's a big party and there's just this guy over in the corner that really, oh man, I don't know what it is about him. He has said not two words to me. We haven't even made eye contact, but there's something about this person that I really do not like. So I'm gonna stay clear of him. And that's just an automatic decision that I've made within moments of walking into the party. And, it comes down a lot of the time to being, not self-proficient, but, you want to kind of save yourself. And it's kind of an innate ability, especially in women, really recognize situations quickly where things could go downhill and you could be in danger kind of thing. So it's that feeling that, if you take it into the nursing world and apply it to your patients, it's more of, I don't know what's going on with this patient, but there's something that I'm missing. Either there's a part of the story that I haven't been privy to because they were too embarrassed to tell it. Maybe they've taken medications and haven't told me about it, so I have to be careful about what medications I then give in the ER. or it's just maybe they've got dementia and they actually don't remember what they've done or how they've fallen or how many stairs they've fallen down. So you kind of have to always be on guard that you're typically missing something, whether people realize that they're not telling you the whole story or not. But it's a kind of thing that I live by that if you're always missing 90% of the story, no matter who's telling it.
What was it like being an emergency room nurse in Canada during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns?
It was fucking shit. It was absolute. Oh, it was the worst. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. So in Canada, we had the slight bit of luxury as to watching it happen everywhere else. And I don't know if that was a luxury or not, because really it just heightened our fear of what was coming. So, you saw Wuhan fall, you saw Italy fall. Oh man, you saw New York fall, and it was just. And we're right across the border from New York. We're not even a full hour from New York, and so you're watching it go down, and you're like, oh man, what's this going to be like, and how is this going to go, and am I going to get sick? Am I going to live? Because you heard of all of the, oh, here we go. You heard of all the nurses dying and all the healthcare providers dying. And so it was in that kind of vein of thinking that we actually had a lot of lawyers up this way volunteer to do all of the nurses' wills for free, which at the time was it was a lovely gesture. And it was coming truly from people just wanting to offer their services. But it really felt like, oh man, we're not expected to survive this at all. So, you really took that to heart and you went to work and you were scared to death about anybody coming in. And the absolute weird difference is, so in my ER, we're used to seeing, 50, 60 people in a day, busy enough, but not crazy. We went down to seeing like 8 to 10 patients in the ER in a day. And so we're all looking around. We're used to running around like crazy people, but we're just standing there, which again, I think made the anxiety worse because we're like, what do you mean the public isn't coming in? Like nobody's coming to emerge. They're terrified. They don't want to catch it. They know that we're going to be a hot spot. And if you're sitting in the emergency waiting room, you have no idea who you're sitting next to, what they've got, what's going on with them. And then it was the same for us. We were screening people and being very diligent, but day to afternoon to nighttime, every single day for weeks, the symptoms would change, the screening questions would change, the policies would change. It felt like nobody knew what was going on, which was true enough, but it made it very disconcerting working, going like, oh, I hope these are the right questions to ask, and I hope that we actually catch somebody who needs to be isolated and we treat them appropriately instead of potentially missing it and then having them sit in our waiting room and infect everybody else. But that was what started everything with the book, at least, silver linings, however small. I took that to heart that I may not survive this. And so I ended up, how do you explain to kids who my kids were 4 and 5.5 at the time when everything started? And, how do you explain to them when they're older that mom chose to continue to go to work and got sick and had to be put on a ventilator and potentially died? How do you explain that to anybody? That I had the choice to not go in, but we all just did. And so I ended up writing down, some of my really good nursing stories from over the years, and there weren't many that really I remember, but very quickly all the really rough stuff poured out of me, and that was the basis of the book, was just these stories where I didn't realize at the time, but maybe the reason why they stuck with me was because there was such a huge involvement of intuition, and whether or not I trusted my gut or I didn't, or I was listened to or I wasn't, and did I actually say anything? And for as awful as everything was, it allowed me to be in a place mentally to completely shatter and then be able to write the book.
You experienced workplace bullying as an ER nurse. How difficult was it for you to deal with being bullied at work in a job that's already stressful?
It was awful. And it continues to be awful. My current bully, who has been at my job, through COVID, and she was, we had an instance where she had gone in and out of actually what we had believed to be the first COVID patient in our ER. And instead of, degloving and sanitizing and changing the mask and all that, she just went in and touched everything on the counter, and grabbed supplies, and then went back into the room, and we all just kind of stood there going like, oh my God, like she doesn't realize that she needed to degown and deglove and all this, because it was still very early in when everything shut down. And so when she'd come out, she ended up having to transfer that patient to a sister site because they were really, really sick. And when she came back, we had completely tossed the cart of all of the supplies, because I'm like, well, this has got to go. And she came back and she was so mad that we had tossed the cart. She thought we were just being wasteful and all this kind of stuff. And she's like, "Oh, well, can you and I have a chat in recess?" I said, "Absolutely. We do need to chat." So we're having this conversation, and I said, I understand that, we used to go into droplet or isolation rooms. You just kind of hold your breath, or maybe you just put on a quick mask, or, you'd be in and out in a hot minute if you just needed to, silence the IV pump or something. And we were doing that routinely before COVID. We weren't nearly as strict with infection control practices as we are now. And she had said, "Well, I saw you guys standing there, and so I did it on purpose." And the idea that somebody could take something like COVID and not care, and then think of it like using it as a weapon, and potentially putting all of us at risk, not just the patients, but your own coworkers. Like, how could you put your own coworkers at risk? And so my husband's a pretty severe asthmatic. Why, guy? You got to turn that down, bud. Wyatt. Thank you. Speaking of kids, my husband is a pretty severe asthmatic, so is my son. And so I completely snapped. I was like, "You can't do that. Like, what are you talking about?" And she goes, "Well, you guys watched me, and I asked for help." And I said, I know that you can yell, and I did not hear you, and neither did my buddy. We're sorry, but like you can't put all of us at risk." And so in bringing that to my manager, it really was kind of like pushed off that it was no big deal, and kind of suck it up and keep at it. And so instead, I just decided that I was going to move sites and try a different thing for a little bit, because I couldn't risk her knowingly or unknowingly putting us all at risk.
Earlier in the interview, you described writing nursing intuition as trauma put on paper or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Uh, how long did it take you to write nursing intuition? How difficult was it for you personally and emotionally to write it?
Yeah, so I will tell people that it took me 6 weeks to write. That is not the norm by any means, shape, or form. It's but understanding that behind that was 14 years of ER experiences and trauma and things that I hadn't dealt with. So when I finally sat down to put pen to paper, sitting in those scenarios that I hadn't dealt with from even 16 years ago at that point, it was really hard. And in teaching now other nurses like how to kind of go into your own experiences and your own stories, and be able to sit in them again, has been fantastic. But everybody needs to know, like, if you are going to write your own personal stories, especially super traumatic ones, it is absolutely fine to only get out a couple of sentences and walk away, and let your mind kind of settle down again to the point where you're mentally strong enough to go back into that scenario. It I stayed up a lot of late nights and a lot of early mornings. So much so that I don't really remember writing a lot of it because I was horribly depressed also at the time. Um, but it was just, it was so cathartic to put down everything and to finally deal with things that even from nursing school that I really hadn't dealt with. Like I'd talked about them and I'd shared the story and I'd kept in contact with the family, but I'd never really dove into, living that moment again. And it took a lot. It was horribly traumatic to go in and out of it, but reading it back, being able to give that story back to the family who, their mother died, oh man, 17 years now, almost 18. To be able to give that story back to the family. And I had already changed details because again, you want to kind of protect patient privacy and you're aware of the risks of all of this. And I gave it back to the family and they said, would you please use her name? And I said, if that's okay by you, like I can use the patient's name, but it was such a weird thing because nurses are usually well, anybody in healthcare is usually exceedingly protective over patients' identities and issues. And even when we're telling stories about weird or random or really cool things that happen at work, you'll notice we never use, we barely use ages, let alone physical descriptors or anything like that. So, it's being able to write that and give it back to the family was absolutely everything. Um, so, take your time. Do not use my 6 weeks as a benchmark because it's absolutely insanity. To be fair, I'm working on a fiction right now, and it's taken me easily like a good 8, 9 months, and I think I'm only halfway done. So, trust me when it's a process, and don't be too hard on yourself because everybody's got a story.
Is nursing intuition independently, traditionally, or hybrid published?
Originally, it was supposed to be traditionally published. I had gotten a deal. We had signed the contract. 2 years had gone by. I was finally being notified that I was moving into editing. Was in editing for maybe 2, 3 months before the publisher, who again was a very, very small publisher, came back to me and said, you know what, we're actually going to go back to our physiotherapy books. We wish you the best with this, but we're giving you your rights back. And so all of a sudden I'm going from thinking I'm going to be traditionally published and not have to put forward a cent to, oh my God, if I'm going to get through this, I'm going to have to front the money and self-publish. So I was very then, quick to look at other books of my in the same categories as mine who were self-published, and I had contacted a lot of the nurse writers, and we had gone back and forth. So I had kind of a little pool of like an editor, a cover designer, and had no idea what a typesetter was, but that was super necessary to make the book look pretty. And PR people. So it was very interesting to kind of then go from just sitting back and being a very passive participant to all of a sudden driving everything and then having to carry the cost of it. So I am self-published, and as much as I admire the traditional route and as much as it really would have lended a ton of credibility for my book, especially, I don't think we shouldn't be discount our self-publishing because truly sometimes that's the only option. Because I wasn't going to reapply to publishers, wait another 2 to 3 years to finally get my book out and potentially have this happen again. So, that's the moral of the story is, yes, traditional publishing is there and it's great if you can get in, and if they continue with you.
You've also written and produced numerous journals and care planners, as well as a symptom tracker for heart patients. How many journals, care planners, and symptom trackers have you produced, and how do each of them work?
So I think I've got a four total. So there's the 100 shifts journal, which it's made for following a new nurse around as they keep track of how their shift is going, any questions they have, any wins, any losses, how the day went. Very much just jot form to kind of keep track of things because it's really hard when you're getting or when you're going from school to bedside, there's a huge gap. And it's almost insurmountable, as we've been seeing with the newer generations who are coming out and graduating and only lasting a year or two before they walk away completely from nursing. So this is a way to really support them and to let them know that, they are learning and you are moving forward. Just takes a really long time to get comfortable with nursing because, not only is it so much different from school, but then you've also got your different specialties. So every specialty is going to be different and work a different way and operate with its own kind of quirks and stuff. But it's just something to help you keep track so that when you have that really, really crummy day when everything, is you go home and you feel like I'm not learning fast enough, I'm not doing enough, this is a great way for your nurses to go back and see themselves like in their own words, well, that day I advocated for the patient. That day I was able to start the IV on the first try. That day I was able to change the patient. I was able to change the whole bedding in the bed with the patient still in it. Because that's a skill. And it's one that we don't really, it's a very small skill that we don't celebrate, but it's another learning stage. So it's a great way for people to be able to keep track of their own wins and really support them as they learn through their careers. And so that's the 100 shifts journal. It comes in a bunch of covers. It also comes in the 30 shift journal just for people if they just want to kind of get a taste of it. Also have the nursing wellness journal. So that's more, nursing nurses taking care of their own wellness at home, keeping track of how much you're sleeping and how much you're eating and what are you eating? Is it just, foods on the go kind of thing? Or are you actually being able to sit down and have real meals that you're actually getting nutrients because we're typically very well known for just grabbing something easy and running because we're always running. There's also alcohol tracker and all that because again what we do is very very hard and so sometimes we don't always use the hard things to cope. Usually it's just the easy grabs to be able to cope. There's also a nurse grief journal. So again, we go through nursing school and we get to bedside and nobody's taught us, how do you grieve somebody that you only knew for 30 minutes and they were dead the whole time? We don't support people emotionally well enough at this point. And this is just another way to try and get me or to allow me to help you try and work through it a little bit without being super overwhelming or a lot going on in the moment. If you just want to jot down a couple of things, just jot down a couple of things. If you want to go bigger detail, we can definitely go bigger detail. And then the heart patient, the care planner for the heart patients. So that's a weekly kind of check-in. So you're checking your blood pressure, you're checking your heart rate, and then, we're checking for different signs and symptoms of heart failure. So are you having a ton of swelling in your leg? Are you having trouble breathing? Are you unable to lay flat when you go to bed and you all of a sudden you're needing one pillow, two pillow, three pillow. Now you have to sleep in the lazy boy. Well, that's probably because you've got fluid built up in your system and you really do need to get that looked at by your physician because it's a very easy fix most times that you just need a little bit extra of your water pill and then we can get you feeling better and go from there. But, a lot of the heart patients that I see coming into the emerge, they can try and tell you when, these symptoms have been going on, but, was it longer? Was it shorter? And really, if all of a sudden your swelling has gotten markedly worse in a day or two, I'm more concerned that it's really going to move into your lungs versus somebody where it's been months of very slow progression of swelling. So it's to be able to then give your physicians and your nurses more data because heaven forbid we never have enough data. And this way you can kind of really get a much better picture of like how the person's coping, how long symptoms have been going for. Are they having chest pains? How long does that happen? When does it happen? Does it get better with just sitting down and relaxing or are you having to take medications? And the more information we can have about your body, the better we can help you kind of recover. And so that was the thought process behind the cardiac patients planner.
One final question. You mentioned that you're working on a fiction writing project. Can you provide our listeners a little bit of a preview of that?
Absolutely. So again, write what you know, right? So an ER nurse or a nurse has witnessed a horrific patient death, is markedly scarred by it, goes off, becomes an alcoholic, goes on a bender. And when she's trying to come back to work, they're thinking that maybe she should try the ER versus the floor because of the negative associations of the floor. And so she's going to the emerge, she's trying to pick it up, and just trying to navigate not just the medical differences between the working the floor and working the emerge, but then also the interpersonal differences. And people start dying. And so it's a murder mystery and a thriller that, what the heck's happening and how do we figure this out?
Jenn, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an amazing guest.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Aaron. I am so sorry it took us so long to get here.
If you know someone who is a registered nurse, recommend Jenn's book, Nursing Intuition, to them. While I have an opportunity, I'll provide another update regarding the relaunch of the AuthorTube and BookTube side of the Apollo Papyrus channel. The video side of the channel will be relaunched sometime in early July, not this month as previously planned, as I'm still working on the finishing touches to the channel, as well as the first few videos I'll upload this summer. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.